You join me in the subterranean layer of Product Review Cars headquarters, and we're heading out in peak hour to test out this. This is a base model Subaru Impreza, and I decided to get a base model because one, it's probably going to be the most popular Subaru Impreza that people are going to buy because this is a commuter hatchback, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not going to some pretty countrysides, I'm not going through some twisty roads, I'm going to be throwing myself directly into day-to-day traffic because that's what the average Subaru Impreza owner's probably going to be doing. They're probably going to be buying this to travel to and from places where there's going to be lots of traffic and they need to commute comfortably, but they also want something with all-wheel drive, and so that's why you would buy this. Now, visibility inside the Subaru Impreza is actually pretty good, and so that means I can join traffic pretty easily. Now, we do have lane departure warnings, we have active lane keep assist, and we also have reverse blind spot monitoring and reverse active braking assist as well. This car is packed to the gills with safety systems, and I really do like the active lane keep assist. Is quite good for long journeys, but then I also do like the blind spot monitoring because that really does help, especially if you get a bit distracted while driving day to day. You've got meetings on your mind, you're thinking about what you're doing the next day, you might not be entirely focused. So when you change lanes, at least the car's looking out for you. Now, Subaru have not updated the powertrain for this generation Impreza. Instead, we're getting the same 2-litre flat 4 under the bonnet, which is petrol only, no turbochargers. And so as I take off from the lights here, it's good to talk about the powertrain we have, which has not been updated for the new Subaru Impreza. It's the same as the previous generation, which is a 2-litre naturally aspirated flat 4 motor, no turbochargers, no hybrid systems. It only produces 115 kilowatts, which is around 150 horsepower. Now, this only weighs around 1.5 tons, so it's not that heavy, but yeah, it's not great for fuel economy figures. So quoted combined fuel economy figures around 7 litres, 8 litres, but then this thing here is chewing through the petrol just a little bit. I am consuming in around 10.9 litres per 100 Ks during my very conservative drive with this car over the past couple of days. Now, the new Subaru Impreza does ride on a new platform, which is shared with the new Crosstrek, and that also means we get a more comfortable seating position, and you've also got a double wishbone suspension setup at the back and McPherson struts up front, so double wishbones, very good for handling, and McPherson's pretty standard for a car like this, but we do get permanent all-wheel drive, which is the mass appeal for this car because it means you can drive on a bit of a gravel road, you can go a little bit on some icy, snowy conditions, slippery surfaces, and feel confident that you have an all-wheel drive system instead of a pure front-wheel drive system. And also, Subaru have thrown a bunch of tech this way. They put a new 11-inch vertical display in this thing, which every new Subaru is getting. You're also getting a bunch of safety systems like radar cruise control, you're getting active lane keep assist like I mentioned, you're also getting blind spot monitoring, a bunch of new safety systems in here, which really help justify the big price hike because this is now going to cost you over $35,000 drive away for the entry-level Subaru Impreza. Now, the wind isolation in here is pretty good. We're traveling around 70 Ks an hour, and I'm not really hearing too much, so it's not too bad. Now, what else are you getting for $35,000? Well, you're getting a pretty cheap-feeling steering wheel, some pretty cheap-feeling seats, and I'm not too sure that the bumper and the bodies of this car actually are paint matched. They look a little bit off. So this is a standard white color on the outside, and probably not the best spec for this base model, but in saying that, it's, you know, the most affordable Subaru Impreza you can buy. But at least you're getting some alloy wheels, which do look quite nice and not very base model at all. Now, you can go above this and get some nicer cloth seats and some heated seats and a few more USB ports, and that would definitely be worthwhile if you're looking for a little bit more functionality out of your Subaru Impreza. And then if you really want to have the fanciest Subaru Impreza, you can get some leather seats and a 10-speaker Harman Kardon sound system. But I don't think that's necessary. I think if you do want a little bit more, you can go ahead and opt for the middle of the range Subaru Impreza, but then I wouldn't really bother with the top of the range Subaru Impreza for this generation. Now, making lane changes in this thing, super easy. Lots of visibility, and of course that blind spot monitoring letting me know something's next to me when I'm indicating, which is great. Now, the brake feel in this thing, kind of interesting. It's a bit grabby, like at speed it's okay, so we can sort of nicely, smoothly stop when we're sort of gliding around like this, but I do find at low speeds it does stiffen up quite a lot. It's almost like something's just like a brake booster or something like that is just very overactive. So at low speeds it can feel a little bit jumpy. Now we got active start stop for the engine, which is great if you want to save a tiny bit of fuel, and also Subaru will put up a little menu here on the screen to let you know how many milliliters you saved over the lifetime of your car by using that feature. So for the time that this car's been driven on the press fleet, it saved 183 milliliters of fuel over 6 minutes and 43 seconds of sitting still while in drive. Now the gearbox is a simple automatic CVT transmission, but Subaru does supply you with a few paddle shifters up here, which is completely unnecessary because a CVT transmission is physically a single gear, but then Subaru does program in a few gears here. If you want to hold revs to go up a hill, you might need to do that because this doesn't have a ton of power. Now we have some more of that cloth up here on the doors. Build quality is okay, lots of scratchy plastics. We are expecting this to be a base model, but I do find the construction to be pretty good here. Everything feels pretty well bolted through the middle, but the door cards do feel a little flimsy. Now, despite this being lower than its Subaru Crosstrek sibling, this does ride very comfortably. Although I did prefer the ride of the Subaru Crosstrek through the city, especially for any sort of awkward potholes or any sort of speed bumps or anything like that. But what I do love when I'm driving around the city is Subaru's eyesight cameras, which are fitted as standard to this car, because they just look out for you. They use a pair of binocular type cameras, which sort of look out in front of you, and if they sense any collisions, they'll first warn you before intervening with any sort of braking, which is quite useful. And it's also got a driver attention warning system on here, so there's some sensors above the screen that will be looking into my eyes, and if I'm looking away for whatever reason, it will remind me to look back on the road. Now, Subaru claims this has a driver recognition feature, which is very interesting, which means I can apparently swap drivers and it will know who's sitting in the seat. So you can set up your driver profile, set up your preferences in the screen and all that, and the car will detect who is sitting here. It's worked pretty well with me just sitting here. I haven't been swapping out the cars, so I can't really say how well it works between other drivers, but it has been picking up and recognizing me according to the profile I set up. Now we do have a push button start as well, so keyless entry and locking and start is all very nice on a base model, so this does feel quite good. And this car can be nice and quiet at low speeds. It is a very easy car to operate, although something that's very interesting about this particular powertrain is that it feels very sprightly. So I'm driving through here and I can sort of just dab a little bit of throttle on, and it sort of really does throw the revs in, and you feel like you've got a more responsive engine under the hood than what the power figure suggests. So if I was to have a lazy turbocharged motor, you might just have a bit of a dead zone before the turbocharger kicks in, but here, because there's no turbocharger, throttle input feels relatively responsive, which can be good, but can also result in a bit of a jerky ride. But yes, the ride is mostly plush, and once you learn how low this car is, you can operate quite smoothly around some roads, but I just prefer the carefree factor of the Subaru Crosstrek and its extra ride height. As you can hear, the steering wheel is a little bit rattly, like that, but there have been no real big rattles or squeaks in this car as I've been driving it, except for the license plate cover, which has been supplied by Subaru for this car. I'd be ripping that straight off because it's creating an awful plastic racket when you close the boot on this thing. But for the daily commute, really easy to drive. I found this thing to be super comfortable. It's just something you don't really have to think about all that much. The servicing costs are around $350 per service. That's sort of a rough estimate on how much each service is going to cost you over 5 years or every 15,000 kilometers. So it's got nice wide service intervals. So it's a pretty cheap runabout. The only thing that's a bit annoying is the high fuel consumption. But I do like, despite this having a big screen here, I hardly have to interact with it unless I want to change the climate controls, which are all trapped inside there, which is a little bit annoying, but you do have physical controls for everything, even your climate controls. So if you want to get into the finesse details of your climate controls, you will have to go on the screen, but for basic controls like demisters and temperature and even your volume and tuner knobs are all physical buttons. You've got physical buttons on your steering wheel, and so that is great. But there is no physical handbrake here, instead it's electronic. Now, something that might be frustrating for some people is the fact that you are going to have a trade-off for that all-wheel drive system in this platform, because it has to account for the rear differential for those rear wheels to get power, which means you're going to lose a bit of that boot depth that you might find in a front-wheel drive car, which might have a nice cavernous boot because it doesn't have to fit anything back there apart from an exhaust muffler. But I will say it's a bit of a slack move to take out the USB ports and also the vents in the back. There are no vents in the back at all, or any USB ports. For this base model, you have to pay extra for USB ports in the rear. What I love about the Subaru Impreza is that it is one of the most affordable Subarus that you can buy right now, and it's a permanent all-wheel drive system, so it's a great solution if you're looking for a brand new car that is relatively affordable to buy. It's going to be relatively affordable to own and has the capabilities of an all-wheel drive system. And also, when you have moments when someone pulls out in front of you, you also have all those safety systems backed up in this latest generation model, which is really quite useful. The grip in the wet as well is quite nice. Now, there's been a couple of rainy days when I've been driving this. Unfortunately, it did not coincide with me filming this, but what's good is that you can feel like you do have a decent amount of grip on the road, and it's only let down by the cheaper tires that are fitted to this. So I would say once these tires are worn through, get a stickier set of tires and you can make the most of that all-wheel drive grip. Now, would I personally buy one? I don't think so. I think I would much prefer the Subaru Crosstrek because of the extra ride height, and it just feels a bit more fun to drive around because it's got a bit more visibility up high, it's just a bit more forgiving on the road, and that's sort of what I would want in a daily commuter. I'm not really big into this small hatchback segment unless it's something that's got a bit of a sporty flair to it, but this being more practical with an all-wheel drive setup, I'd be more happy to ride around in the compact Subaru Crosstrek, which is basically a lifted hatchback, which is kind of rare to have a lifted hatchback with a proper all-wheel drive system like that. Now, thanks for keeping me company in peak hour. My name's Cameron, this is Product Review Cars, and if you want to see more car content, make sure you follow us on Instagram and TikTok using the handle @ProductReviewCars, and if you want to read my reviews of these cars, make sure you go to productreview.com.au, and there you can read and review your own car and other car reviews that people have written.